Today's average video is about top balancing lithium iron phosphate batteries. And I'm going to show you the fastest way you can do that without any fluff. Let's get to it. Alrighty, now the fluff. According to Google AI and why you should top balance your lithium iron phosphate batteries. Alright, why top balancing is essential. Number one, maximizes capacity. Top balancing ensures every cell in the pack reaches its maximum possible state of charge, thereby maximizing the overall usable energy of the battery. Number two, provides a uniform starting point. All cells are brought to the same voltage level, around 3.65 volts, which is a fully charged cell, giving them a consistent starting point before use. Number three, prevents premature disconnect. A battery management system, or BMS, may shut off charging if one cell hits its high voltage limit before others. Top balancing helps prevent this, ensuring the entire bank charges to full. Number four, improves performance and longevity. By equalizing the cells, you reduce the stress on individual cells, which extends the battery pack's overall cycle life. And then there are also some key considerations. So the initial balance. It is particularly important to top balance cells when you first receive them or before building a brand new battery pack. Active balancers. While not a substitute for top balancing, an active balancer can help maintain the balance between cells during regular cycling after the initial top balance. And then the last one is the cell variation. Even cells from the same batch can have slight variations in internal resistance and capacity, which can lead to imbalance over time. Top balancing corrects for these initial differences. Alrighty, the reason I read that to you is just in case you weren't familiar with top balancing lithium iron phosphate battery cells. And in one of my last videos, whenever I was reviewing the AOUSK server rack batteries, I mentioned that I would do a capacity test as the battery sits, basically charge it up to full charge, and then do a full capacity test to figure out what the end result was. And then after that, I said I was going to remove the top and then manually top balance every single cell. M Brown 2A, his comment says, "I'd like to see the process used. Thanks for the vid." He was basically asking if I could show you the process that I use to manually top balance a lithium iron phosphate battery pack. Now this also brings up a couple of different things. Is one, the BMS should technically top balance your batteries, which is correct. And the next one is you're a DIYer just like me and you have OCD and you have to make sure everything is perfectly top balanced. That's about it. So first question is, do you really need to top balance your lithium iron phosphate batteries or just lithium batteries in general? Do I really need to do it because the BMS, I mean, that's kind of its whole job is to manage the battery. That's kind of like a yes and no question. Of course, I'm gonna say yes because just as we read, it just makes everything better. The problem is if it's a brand new battery, you're gonna need to balance charge it no matter what. The reason of that is because the batteries, you know, they sit at a warehouse for who knows how long, okay? And just like we read that no two batteries are alike, even when they're in the exact same batch. Whenever you start charging up batteries, each battery has its own internal resistance. So they're all gonna charge and discharge slightly different. And that's why the BMS tries to balance the cells out. So back to what I was saying is you order a battery, it gets here and you don't know how long it's been sitting. You charge it up and typically all the cells are just way out of balance and it takes forever for those to get back into balance. The normal person will just use the battery and over time as you're charging the battery up, the balancer will usually balance all the cells out and it's basically top balanced after that. And that's just, again, based on how the BMS was programmed. So on some BMSs, there's a couple different options for balancing. There is a balancer enabled based on a voltage that's set in there, and then the other option is typically balance only when charging, again based off of a certain voltage. So from the manufacturer, those are set at like 3.4 volts. which is fine. But for us DIYers, we typically like to set them at 3.45 volts. I know that's not a huge difference, but that's just what we like to do. So as you start charging up the battery, each cell voltage is going to rise, and then once they go over that 3.4 volts, that's when the BMS will turn on the balance, and it'll try to keep everything at the same voltage all the way up to the very, very top, and that's what we want to see. But sometimes whenever the BMS is programmed to balance only when charging, in my opinion and a lot of other people's opinion, it just takes way too long, and sometimes it might not ever even get there because, again, once you do your first charge, the cells are so far out of balance that the BMS, it just can't keep up because they're so far out of balance. And that's why we recommend on the BMS having the balancer enabled function enabled to balance the batteries, because you don't need to have a charge on the battery or anything like that. Once the cells are above that 3.4 volt threshold or whatever number is programmed in there, it's going to start balancing out no matter you're charging or not. That's what we prefer to see. So on the AOUSK batteries and on the eco-worthy batteries, those two server rack batteries had the option of balance only when charging is enabled. So it's gonna take forever for those to top balance. So what I typically do with those style of batteries that you can't change anything on is I'll charge it up just to see how far out of balance it is. I'll do my initial capacity test. After that, I'll charge it back up, bring it over here, pop the top, and then I will manually top balance the battery from there. And in this video, I'm gonna show you my process, which will be like the fastest way that you could technically do it. And also keep in mind, there's gonna be many other ways to do it if you decide to do this. There is a slow and painful way, which would be just putting your battery on a very, very slow trickle charge that will allow the BMS to hopefully keep everything in the balance, but again, it's gonna take for freaking ever. The next one would be is to pop the top off and then put a 3.6 volt charger on every single battery inside and just let every single cell charge up to 3.65 volts. And then the third way, which is the way that I typically do it, I'll just show you. Proceed with caution. Do this at your own risk. Let's get to it. All right, so we'll go over a couple of the items that you could use. You don't necessarily need all of these. You will need a minimum of a buck boost converter, which would be option number one. These are like $12 or $13 on Amazon, but you will need to supply your own power supply. So you can feed this with power, and then you can output the voltage of the battery that you're trying to top balance. If you're just doing a 3.6 volt cell like we're going to be doing in this battery here, these do have a couple of knobs on here that you can adjust. Basically, you would adjust it to 3.65 volts, and then you would fully charge a battery. The next option would be is to get a 20 or 30 volt power supply. These are around $40 to $50 again on Amazon, but it's all in one. Just set it to 3.65 volts, which you can also adjust your current and stuff on here as well. But on here you do get a little tiny screen, so it just makes it a little easier. A few other things that are optional would be one of these battery capacity testers right here. Again, these are like maybe $40 or $50 again on Amazon. You don't technically need one of these, but if you're trying to top balance a battery as quickly as humanly possible, which I'm going to show you today, it is nice to have one of these handy. The next optional thing would be a battery charger. So this one is from opsolar.com or Orient Power. This is a 48 volt DC battery charger. I think this is the 10 amp version, and this cost around $121. And then this one over here can also be gotten from Amazon. It's basically one of these chargers right over here, but this one goes up to 60 volts, so you can actually recharge the entire battery. I want to say I actually got this one off of Alibaba, and it might have been $80. But if you go on Amazon to get this exact same one, it's a 60 volt 20 amp charger. I think it's quite expensive on Amazon. Those are some of the options that you will need, but I would actually choose one of these 20 volt chargers over this option over here, because there's kind of like some setup and stuff that you have to do with this to make sure you don't overcharge one of your batteries. So I'd actually recommend a power supply minimum. All right, I'm just going to show you the top of this battery real quick and how everything is connected, because that'll play an important role in how you top balance the battery, okay? So battery number 1 is always going to be your most negative battery over here, okay? So on each battery there are balance leads. All right, so battery 1 is right over here. So here's our negative, and then here's going to be our positive, and you can actually see the terminal right here. It's labeled B1, okay? So that's going to be our positive post. And then for this particular battery, we're going to continue going in this direction. So battery 2's negative is also right here, and then its positive is right here. And on our little label right here, it's going to say B2. Okay, and you're just going to continue following all the bus bars until you get all the way down to cell 16 right over here, which might be a little tricky to see, but there is a B16 right here. All right, so how I do this is I turn the battery on, and then I will connect to it with Bluetooth. So I'll be using the Overkill Solar app right here, and that's going to give us the cell voltages for every single cell that is inside the battery right here. All right, so now that we're connected right here, option 1, of course, like I mentioned, would be using a buck boost converter. You're going to set it to 3.65 volts, okay? That's it. You're going to test that with your multimeter. Make sure it doesn't go over 3.65 volts. The preferable option would be to use this. This would be the bare minimum way to do it, okay? So we're going to turn on our power supply right here. We're going to adjust our voltage down to 3.6. And then the easiest way, like I said, is you are going to take your leads right here, and you're going to charge up every single battery in here to 3.65 volts, okay? So we're going to connect our negative up to battery number 1, and then the positive side is going to go to the other side on the bus bar on this side. Okay, you can see we're pumping in 4.5 amps, and if we take a look at the app right here, you can see our cell number 1, the voltage is slowly rising. All right, so doing it like this, as you can see, it's going to take quite a bit of time because we have to do one cell at a time. I will show you what I typically do to get this done as quickly as humanly possible. So I'm going to turn off this power supply. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up the battery charger right here. Again, you could use this one because it's adjustable, or you could use the Orient Power one right here. I'm going to use this one because it gives us a nice little fancy screen. So let me get that hooked up. Alrighty, got my positive and negative hooked up to the battery. Those are connected over here to the charger. We're going to turn on our charger, and I like to set mine to 56 volts and roughly 2 amps for the first initial charge. So that's what we're going to do first. Going to turn on the circuit breaker, and we're going to start charging. So I'm going to let this sit on the charger for a couple of minutes until the cells start to get kind of out of balance. Actually, we'll just turn up the current real quick and speed this process up. All right, so as we're charging, if you take a look at the BMS, our cell delta is starting to spread quite a bit. We're up to 125 millivolt difference right now. Off to the right of that, you can see our lowest voltage cell, and you can actually see our highest voltage cell, which is cell number 3. So what I would do in this particular moment is I would hook up the power supply right here to cell number 5 so we can start charging that one a little bit quicker, and I would also start discharging cell number 3, because cell number 3 is going to hit the high voltage cutoff first. All right, so cell number 3 actually hit the cutoff pretty quick and cut charging to this entire battery so we don't overcharge that cell. So that's where the discharger comes into play. So we're going to hook this guy up real quick to cell number 3 so we can start draining some power out of that one. Once we do that, we'll start charging the battery pack again. All right, so when you're doing all this, there's a lot to pay attention to. That's why it's nice to have the Bluetooth app open. Okay, so we're going to take our negative to the negative of cell 3, and the positive, of course, to cell number 3. And then on our discharger right here, that was already turned on, we're going to start discharging that cell right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the BMS so the charger will turn back on. We'll have to reconnect to the app again, of course. I'm going to turn the current down over here so we're not charging too fast. You reconnect to the BMS. If we were paying attention, we wouldn't have had to do that. All right, I'm going to turn up the current a little bit more for cell number 3 so it starts draining a little quicker. Oh, actually, let me stop the charge real quick. You can see cell number 14 actually turned out to be the highest. So what I could do now is move this over to cell 14. So we'll start draining that one down, pulling 3 amps out of cell 14 right now. Also, while we're doing that, we can look at our minimum cell, which is cell number 5. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to hook up this power supply to cell number 5 and start charging that one. Okay, so we'll turn the power supply on. Boom, we're charging that one at 3.7 amps. All right, I'm gonna move my discharger back over to cell number 3. Again, if you pay attention, you can do all of this at the exact same time, okay? So cell number 3 right over here, and we'll start doing that right there, okay? Now I'm going to re-enable the charge over here. The reason we turn the charger back on is so we can keep a charge on all the cells in there. It just makes everything go a lot quicker. All right, so our highest cell right now is cell 15. We'll move this over to cell 15, which is right here. Discharger back on. See, it's kind of like a game of just going back and forth with the discharger and the power supply. So now it looks like cell number 9 is the lowest one in the pack, so I could technically switch this one over to cell number 9. I'm going to move my discharger back over to cell number 3, and I'm going to blast it with 5 or 6 amps right now. I should have noted the time when I started this, maybe 5 minutes ago, 6 minutes ago. I'm going to raise my current up just a little bit over here. I'm going to move back over to cell number 15. Got 6.5 amps on cell 15. And then I could move that down to cell 14. Blast that one a little bit. Raise this one up as well. 2 amps. All right, so cell number 12 is our next highest. Looks like 15 again. And actually, cell number 14 and 15 are somewhat close in the voltage range. You can actually bring this down and get both cells at the exact same time. So we're going to go with cell 14 and 15. And you can do the same thing for the power supply. If you have a cell or 2 or 3 in series that are all the exact same voltage, you can hook up that and then raise your voltage on here and hit all 3 cells at once. So now I've got 14, 15, and 16. I could technically drain all 3 of those at the same time if I needed to. Now we're going to go to cell 3 again. Okay, so now our cell number 5 is the highest voltage one, and that's the one we have the power supply on over here. So we're going to take that off of there, and we're going to go to cell number 9 for the power supply. So we'll pull these off right here, and we'll find number 9. So that's 7, 8, and 9. We'll hook up right here, and boom, 2.8 amps. All right, and then once these start getting closer in balance, we'll be able to raise the voltage over here on this power supply to bring the whole battery pack up a little bit higher. I'm actually going to raise our voltage up a little bit. All right, so that is basically how I will top balance a battery as quickly as humanly possible with a full battery charger right here up to 58.4 volts if we need to go that high. A 30 volt power supply, and that is mainly to charge individual cells or maybe 2 to 3 cells, and then the discharger to discharge the highest voltage cell to bring that down in balance with the other ones, okay? And this shouldn't take too long. I'm gonna put it on a time lapse and I'll finish this up. Time now is 12:10 p.m. time now is 12:42. That took me 30 to 40 minutes, and we are within the 41 millivolt delta range. We did hit another cell overvoltage when I wasn't paying attention, but I did want to mention one other thing to help this go a little quicker, and you won't have to keep resetting the BMS. Then reconnecting with the app is what I usually do. Is I'll go down here to the cell over voltage and then the release. Right now they've got it set for 3.380 volts. I will typically change that to 3.640. Hit done. Basically what it does is it keeps hitting the over voltage, it'll shut off, but it doesn't take as long for the BMS to start charging again. It'll allow you to balance a lot quicker. And then also, of course, I come in here and I change this to 10, hit that done, and as we usually like to do is put this to 3.45 right there, okay? And then we'll write that to the BMS. All right, I think we're going to call it for this. We're sitting at 58.1 volts. Typically, you would never really charge it this high unless you're doing another top balance, but our delta right now is 23 millivolts, which isn't bad. I typically like to get it under 10 if I can, but I'm not too worried about it at this point. But that's pretty much what I would do to top balance one of these batteries as quickly as I possibly can. And again, and that is for if the balancer enabled option inside the settings, which I could show you right here. If the balancer enabled switch is not enabled or you can't change it, just like this one, the one that's programmed into here is balance only when charging. Whenever it's set like that, that's how I would top balance one of these batteries as quickly as I possibly could. All right, well that's gonna be how I would typically top balance a lithium iron phosphate battery when you can't change any of the settings in the BMS, or if the balance only when charging option is enabled. Again, like I said, the other option, just balancer enabled, would be preferable because once the cells reach 3.45 volts or whatever is set in there, you don't have to have a charge on the battery or anything like that. Once they're over the 3.4 volts or whatever's set, they're going to start balancing. And usually, if you do like a cycle or two of the battery, all of those cells will typically come into balance. The Vader server rack batteries that I have over there have that balancer enabled function enabled, and I didn't have to do anything special to those. I didn't manually top balance those. I just did a couple small short cycles on the top end, and those batteries balanced out perfectly fine. You know, I didn't have to do anything special with those. So anyway, the other option I was going to mention was the active balancer. I know a lot of people will use those as well. If you do use one of those, it is best to have one that has a button that you can turn it on and off, because once you get the cells in balance or top balance, you don't want to keep the active balancer running unless the cells get really out of balance for some odd reason. But if they start getting really out of balance, then that usually indicates that there's a problem with maybe a connection in there, or one of the cells are just much, much weaker or stronger than all of the others. Just like I mentioned at the very, very beginning of the video, you know, no two batteries are alike, even if they were all made in the same, you know, batch. You know, like if they made 100 batteries in one day, all of those batteries, even though they're built the exact same, they're not gonna be 100% identical. Anyway, that's gonna be how I would manually top balance a battery. If this video was helpful in any way, make sure you like that smash button on your way out, and I will see you on the next. Where are we at here? Number 1 is the lowest.
Shenanigans.
I took the wrong lead. That's why you gotta pay attention. Okay, moving on. Number 8 is our lowest. Negative right here. Yeah, I should have different wires so they don't look the same.
Shenanigans.